In this chapter, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the options that we have for importing resources with our theme or embedding resources into our theme as well. So let's start by looking at our importing options, and then we will take a look at our embedding options. Our first option is the ability to import resources using the resources importer that's built into our themes. Now, if you've used a previous version of Liferay, perhaps 6.2, 7.0, something like that, you may already be familiar with this concept, okay? Now, the resources importer allows us to essentially take a number of resources or assets on the platform, if you're familiar with that term. Those are just the different content types, include it in our theme, and then use a sitemap to map it all together into a set of pages on our platform. Okay, so what this would do is when we deploy it, it would give us the ability to essentially generate a site with all of the content and pages included. All right, now this is done using the Sitemap.json and the Assets.json. So let's go ahead and discuss these in more detail. The Sitemap.json is going to give us the ability to essentially map our site pages, the layouts, and the actual widgets or content that we want to display on those pages, okay? So this is just a quick example of a page that has a 50-50 set of columns, all right? Here we've included the login widget as well as the hello world widget, okay, within those columns. We have our friendly URL set and then the name and title of the actual page itself. All right, so once deployed, this would generate a new site that would include this specific page called welcome, and it would include our two widgets on here as well. Now, obviously, these widgets don't require any of the actual content that we can provide as well. We can flesh this out in more detail by having our own content on display. And the way we would do that is we would include our resources in our web.inf folder of our theme, in source, and then in the resources importer. And then in the resources importer, we would use folders that are using the terms from the API that represent these different assets. For example, we would have the document library with a subfolder called documents to include all of our images or whatever other documents we want to have on display. For web content, we can include a journal folder, and the journal can include articles, templates, and structures. And we'll talk more about structures and templates in chapter 5. So we can include all of these resources, and we can go ahead and map it together using the sitemap.json. All right. So if you are interested in doing something like this, there is a ton of documentation on how you can use the resources importer. So I would encourage you to take a look and give it a shot, even with the theme we're building now. You can go ahead and pause the video and attempt to go ahead and set this up and deploy it. Now, even though this is the traditional way of including resources into our theme, this will be deprecated in later versions of Liferay. And we do have a work in progress feature that will be replacing the resources importer in the future. This work in progress feature is called the Site Initializer. All right, you can actually see some site initializers included in many of our marketplace themes that were built by our Liferay engineers. All right. Now, site initializers are Java modules, so they will require some Java knowledge to go ahead and develop these, as well as some different tools, namely the Blade CLI to get this set up. Okay, you can create a module, and what it allows us to do is to create a site template that includes page fragments instead of the traditional resources. The page fragments will simplify the way we can actually display content on our pages. And again, we'll talk about page fragments more in chapter 5. So let's go ahead and take a look at a basic breakdown for our page fragments in Java. Now, there's a lot more to the Java code here. We've included the source in the exercises for you to go ahead and take a look. All right, but at a very basic level, if we wanted to create a fragment collection, this is essentially a folder of fragments, and we wanted to give it a name like home or something along those lines, we could add it to the Java code by simply adding something like this, okay? What this does is it allows us to identify the fragment collection, and it allows us to create a page based on that fragment collection. All right, so if you want to pause the video and take a look at the source, you can see this in context of the folder Java, and you can feel free to take a look there. Now, in addition to this, we do have an optional exercise. If you just want to see this in action, see what this actually looks like, we do have the default Fjord theme with the site initializer included that you can go ahead and deploy, restart your server, and then go ahead and take a look at a new Fjord site using the site initializer. All right. So if that's something you want to do, you can feel free to pause the video and walk through those steps. They should be included in the exercise steps on the page. All right, so those are our two options. We have Resources Importer, which is our traditional method for including resources on the platform. And then we have the Site Initializers, which is sort of a bleeding edge option for us right now. If you guys want to give that a shot, I would recommend taking a look at GitHub to see how it's implemented in the different themes, and then use whatever Java knowledge you have to go ahead and set it up yourself and see how it all works. Now, in addition to including resources on the platform to display our theme and context of some content, we may actually need to embed some content or widgets in our theme as well. All right, there are a number of use cases for making sure that we do things like have search on a certain part of the page, or include languages on a certain part of the page, or anything along those lines. Okay, if that's the case, we have a number of options for embedding those widgets in content. So let's go ahead and take a look. Now, the way we embed these widgets or some of the content here is we can use one of these 3 taglibs available to us in our FTL files. Okay, we can do it in Portal Normal, or we could do it in any of the other breakout files that we've included, such as the footer FTL in our theme. So we have the Liferay Portlet Runtime Taglib, the Liferay Journal Article Taglib, and the Liferay UI Asset Display Taglib. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at these different taglibs here. Now, in order to include any widget on the platform, we can use the Liferay Portlet Runtime. And what this does is it requires a Portlet Provider action and a Portlet Provider class name. Now, the Portlet Provider action is going to require the Portlet Provider to perform an action for display. So basically, what mode would our portlet be in? Would it be in edit mode, view mode, etc.? Okay. The most common action, of course, is view, and this is just the basic display for the widget that you want to have displayed. Okay. The Portlet Provider class name is essentially just going to require the full class name for the actual widget you want to have on display. It is important to note here before we move on that any embedding that you do in your theme needs to be considered appropriately. Okay. And the reason I say this is because if you embed something in the theme, this is an additional resource that's going to be embedded on every page in a site where your theme is applied. Okay, so if you do too much embedding, that's going to introduce a lot of overhead. But if there's the case where you were going to place, let's say, a search or a navigation or anything along those lines on every page anyway, then it's something that you can simply do in your theme. All right, so let's take a look at our other options here for our actual content types. Okay, we have a taglib specifically for web content. All right, if you want to create a web content article and embed that in your pages in some way, okay, so this could be some sort of branding that you want to have included, you can use the Liferay Journal Article Taglib. All right, now what this requires is the article ID of the web content itself. This can be found in the content section of Site Administration. All right, the template key for any web content template you are using, and then the group ID. This is going to be the site ID. So where does the actual content exist on the platform? All right. Once you have those included, you can actually embed any sort of web content in your theme using this taglib. All right, and we also have the asset display taglib. This is for other assets other than web content. So for example, if I wanted to embed a specific document or an image or something along those lines, I could theoretically use this Liferay UI asset display taglib. All right, now this requires the class name, okay? So that's gonna be what actual content type, blogs, documents, wikis, message boards, whatever asset you're actually referring to. The class PK is going to be the primary key of the asset that you want to display. All right, and then the template is going to be if you have any template included or just simply the full content template, which will just display everything. All right, so you can use these assets to display, again, widgets, web content, or assets through your theme. And of course, because these are taglibs that are available on Liferay, we can use these taglibs in any of our free marker templates. All right, so that includes templates that we will talk about more in later chapters. All right, so keep these taglibs in mind. We could actually use some of these in our templates later. All right, so let's go ahead and recap here. We have a couple of ways of including resources and embedding widgets or content into our themes. All right, we have the traditional method of the resources importer. This allows us to include resources in our theme and create a sitemap using that sitemap.json so that it will generate a new site on deploy. We have the site initializer option that allows us to create a site that will display page fragments. All right, and then when it comes to embedding, we can embed widgets, web content, and assets using the taglibs available to us in FreeMarker. So with this wraps up our theme development. Congratulations, you've created a theme from scratch. All right, in the next chapter, what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and take a look at the layout template modules as well that we can use to interact with our themes and determine the structure of our page where our content and widgets can be on display. All right, so I'll see you guys in the next chapter.